Owning a car in New York City is both a luxury and a challenge. The expense, the hassle of dealing with traffic and parking, and if you would even use the car enough to justify having it, are all things to consider. Today, I and a few other incredible and knowledgeable New Yorkers are going to dive into this subject and hopefully make your decision a little easier if you're considering bringing a car to the city. Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Hannah and I make videos about New York City and my life living here. And today we're going to be talking about if it's worth it to have a car in New York City. So let's get into it. I have lived in New York City for almost 3 years now, and for the bulk of that time, I have not had a car here. Back in October, however, after visiting family in Virginia, Ross and I decided to bring a car back throughout the duration of the holiday season because we were going to be traveling back and forth a lot, as well as taking a little trip up to Hartford, Connecticut to see his incredibly talented sister Georgia on the national tour of Escape to Margaritaville. Also, I vlogged that trip and you should go watch it because it has farm animals, I'm just saying. Anyway, considering all the travel that was going on in that short time period, we thought it would be a good time to test out having a car here since we only had to commit for a couple of months because we could take it back to Virginia over Christmas. So we are driving the car, and by we, I mean Ross is driving the car into New York for the first time because we're going to be keeping a car here for at least the next month, maybe two. And yeah, how's it going so far?
Fine.
So let's talk about the parking situation. This is definitely the most major thing you're going to need to consider if you are considering bringing a car to the city. You can either park in a parking garage or lot, or you can just do street parking, and there are advantages and disadvantages to both of these options. We just booked a month in a parking garage very close to our building, and it was $300, which is disgusting. It's so expensive, and that is one of the cheaper garages that we could find, so yikes, this is expensive. A parking garage is going to be significantly more expensive than street parking. As past Hannah just said, we paid $300 to park our car in a garage for a month. And what's even more ridiculous than that is that that is on the low end of prices for the area that we live in. The garage we parked in was in downtown Brooklyn, which is where we live. It's a very busy spot and also very close to Manhattan. Just like apartments, in or close to Manhattan is almost always going to be more expensive than further out in the other boroughs. I did a quick search on spothero.com and I'm just gonna insert some screenshots here of my findings. Here are some examples of what it costs to park in a garage in my neighborhood of downtown Brooklyn. As you can see here, $300 was a pretty good deal for the area. Some of these garages go up all the way to $700, so it can be very expensive. Here are some garage prices in downtown Manhattan. As you can see, it's much more expensive here than in my part of Brooklyn. The lowest price what I'm seeing is $399. The most expensive is $1,000 to park your car. Here's Midtown Manhattan, similar pricing, maybe overall a little cheaper than downtown, still absurd. These garages here are in the South Bronx, so not too far from Manhattan, but still in an outer borough. You can see the prices are a lot cheaper here, getting as low as $200. You'll also get better prices if you go a little bit deeper into Queens. Here are some garage prices in Flushing, as well as South Brooklyn here, Coney Island, Sheepshead Bay. Prices are more around the $200 range. So as you can see here, garage prices are not cheap anywhere in the city, but especially not in Manhattan. Your best option, however, if you are looking to save some money, is to not park in a garage at all and just do street parking, because this can be totally free. Ross and I got a taste of what it was like to street park as well, because we weren't traveling back to Virginia until about a week and a half after our second month in the garage ended, and paying by day or by hour in a garage is always going to be more expensive, so we decided to just street park. Our experience with street parking was frustrating. When you park on the street here, you can't park in certain spots or on certain sides at certain days or hours of the week. So you really have to be up on the rules and ready to move your car when necessary. Most commonly, your non-metered spots are going to be subject to alternate side parking. Alternate side parking regulations are in effect when the street is being cleaned. So when that's going on, you can't be parked on the side of the street that is being swept. This typically results in having to move your car at minimum once a week. In the week and a half that Ross and I were doing the street parking, we had to move the car 3 times. So the first spot that Ross found, he found it very easily in just a few minutes, and it was very close to our building. But unfortunately, it was a Friday and this was only a weekend spot, so we had to move the car again on Sunday, and that was a nightmare. That took an hour and a half. And I'm really not surprised, but at the same time, it's just shocking. You know, even though we expected it, even though we knew, it's just like, why does anyone drive here? We don't have to move till Friday though, so that's great. On Thursday, when we had to move the car the 3rd time, we had an easier time. It only took about 30 minutes, but we did have to park about a 15 to 20 minute walk from where we live. My experience with this is obviously very limited, but my friend Pedro has a ton of thoughts on and tips for street parking. He's had a car here for a very long time now, and he exclusively parks on the street. He doesn't use garages at all, so let's hear what he has to say about it.
Hey Hannah, how's it going? I'm in my car right now, so sorry if there's any weird noises or bad lighting. I just found a parking spot after looking for about 10 minutes, which I think is pretty good. I live in Brooklyn. I would think that parking is substantially easier than living in Manhattan, although I know some people that live in Chelsea, West Village area that find parking all the time. They haven't really had too many problems with that. I think, to me, just having a car, the most prominent thing about having a car is the whole parking situation. I'm always thinking about it. It's kind of like built into my routine. I just like know when it's like Monday or Tuesday, oh, I gotta move my car because I'm in a certain spot. So that's a big thing. Once you can figure out your whole parking situation, it's a little bit manageable, but there's a lot of other things that come with that. I work from home, so that makes it a lot easier, being able to, hop out of my apartment real quick and move my car and then hop back in and go to work. That is something that most people might not have the ability to do. So in that situation, having a car with street parking is a bit tougher because you might not be able to move it during that time block. Something else to consider, which stresses me sometimes, is if I were to ever go on a trip or something, I really have to think about where my car's parked. If I'm going to be gone for more than a week, I can't leave my car in a certain spot or it'll get ticketed or towed. So that's something that you don't really think about at first until the time comes where that has to happen. So in that situation, you'd probably have to put your car in a garage, which I can go a little bit into, but I don't have a ton of experience with garages because I tried to avoid them in general just because I'm cheap. So the benefits of having it are, I think they're pretty great. Being able to leave the city or just go to other parts of the city whenever you want to is pretty awesome. Like, we were able to go to the Bronx. We were able to go to like a last minute baseball game with Ubers costing $120 and us being super late. And then also just going back home, for me, that's during COVID, that was the big thing because we used to take the bus all the time and it wasn't safe, to take a bus crammed with people. So I decided to keep my car here. Typically I would leave it back home for the winter with my parents, and they would use it, which was great too because they could benefit from that. And I did that because moving the car in the winter is a pain. If it snows, there are chances where you'll get the free pass to leave your car on the street for a couple days, but by like day 4 or 5, they're like, all right, you got to move your car, even if it's under a pile of snow. So that happened to me, and I shoveled snow up for like 2-3 hours, and that was a pain. I could live without it because we take the subway all the time, but it has a lot of benefits, it has a lot of perks, but I don't always rely on it just because of the whole parking situation. It can be really hard to find spots sometimes. Like, I can look for a spot for 10 minutes like today, or an hour and a half, which I've done on multiple occasions. So sometimes, like in those scenarios, I do not want to move my car because I'm like, I just wasted an hour and a half of my life sitting in my car. I want to, cherish that spot and keep it for as long as I can. For alt-side parking, there's a Twitter account. It's an official Twitter account. It's automatic. It sends a tweet out at, I think, 8 a.m. and 4 p.m. and it just says whether or not there's any suspensions, which is good for like snow days. But then on the alt-side parking website, they have like planned holidays. That is the good thing. There's a ton of holidays on there. So if there's a holiday on the day where you were supposed to move your car, you can leave it there for another week. So that's pretty awesome. But yeah, that's basically all I got. Hope that was helpful.
Another big expense that I don't personally have any experience with because I've only had a car here short term is car insurance. Shocker, I know, but car insurance is significantly more expensive in New York City than it is in most other places. According to NerdWallet, in 2022, drivers in New York City pay an average of $3,218 a year for car insurance. For context, also according to NerdWallet, the national average is $1,592 per year. Yikes. Another shocker, but gas prices are also more expensive here. Right now, at the time of filming this, the cost of a regular gallon of gas at my nearest gas station is $4.69. Now we're gonna hear from somebody most of you guys probably know, and if you're over here on my channel and you don't know him, what are you doing? But ActionKid has some thoughts on this.
So, should you get a car in New York City? And the answer to that is, it depends. For like 80% of the people living here, you don't need a car. But I'd recommend it for those who are in remote areas of the city where it's hard to get public transportation. Like a lot of Staten Island is like that, where there's vast amounts of space between the public transit and easy access to driveways. Or Eastern Queens may work because you need to go to Long Island, which requires a lot of driving. But for those who live in the more populated areas of the city that are well served by the subway system, like here in Astoria, Queens, there's no reason to get a car in my experience. There's just so many headaches. Not only is it expensive, you have to pay like insurance, you have to pay gas, maintenance, all that stuff. It's also a hassle because there's so much traffic around. It takes a long time to get to a place if you're stuck in traffic. And the New York City Police Department is also very aggressive issuing fines too. So if you're parking somewhere, you better make sure that those signs are followed and you're not parking in a no parking zone. They'll give you a ticket. Some of these tickets, they can cost like $100 for like double parking, or blocking a fire hydrant is more expensive too. And yeah, that's why I don't recommend owning a car in New York City, because of all these hassles between the traffic, between the fines, and not only that, it may even take you longer to get to someplace with a car. If you're living in a neighborhood that has everything you need within walking distance, then there's no reason to get a car. And you may think that having a car would be good to go to these excursions like upstate New York, or to drive to visit a friend that's further away. But in all honesty, it's probably better just to go to where you need to go and then rent the car. And you'll probably end up saving a lot of money than just owning the car for the entire month or year, making payments on it. So that time where you need a car, just go somewhere, rent it, or call a car service.
I think a very good point that ActionKid makes is one that a lot of people who are moving here, and even people who already live here in the more populated areas, don't think about so much. And it's that there are parts of New York City that are a little more isolated. There are total subway dead zones in parts of the outer boroughs where you have to walk like really, really far to get to a subway stop. It's also worth noting that in these areas, street parking is going to be a lot easier, garage parking won't be so expensive, so maybe it won't be such a hassle either. Something else he points out though is that it can take a really long time to get to where you're going in a car because traffic in the city is awful. I have my partner Ross here to discuss this with me because, to be honest with you guys, I'm a very anxious driver, especially in traffic, and Ross did all of the driving when we had the car here. So what do you think about the traffic situation?
I mean, just walking around, you can see that it's always bad.
From the passenger seat, it was not good.
And then you get on the highways in rush hour and you're just sitting there for 2 hours. That's pretty terrible.
Yeah, when we went to Connecticut, on the way back in, it was a Sunday night, and we were on the highway in the Bronx for like 2 hours. We were like 12 miles from home. It was not far. And we just sat there for hours. It was awful.
Hopefully you don't have to go to the bathroom. And then, driving around places like here, downtown Brooklyn, there's just crazies zipping in and out, and you're just terrified the whole time, especially if you don't know exactly where you're going and you're like looking around for the street signs.
Yeah, sometimes the roads to me from the passenger seat look like you can't even tell where you're supposed to drive. Like the lines aren't done well. People are just sitting at like all sorts of angles like this, and I'm like, where are you even supposed to go? So for you, is having a car here worth it?
Negative. Would not recommend.
And on that note, we're going to hear from my friend and fellow YouTuber, Siera Alexis, who disagrees with Ross. She's a native New Yorker, and she has always had a car here. So let's hear from her.
Hey, my name is Siera Alexis, and I'm a native New Yorker who has a car. So there are many pros and cons to having a car in New York City. With my personal experience in terms of the pros, it definitely makes it a lot easier when it comes to grocery shopping because you don't have to like look around the bags on the subway or on the bus or anything. It also comes in handy when you have dogs like I do. I have 2 bulldogs, and when it comes to us taking them to the vet or anything, it's just a lot easier putting them in the car because if you guys don't know, you can't bring your dogs on the subway unless they could fit in a carrier. And my 55-pound dogs are definitely not fitting in a carrier. Another pro to having a car in the city is that during times like this, when it's freezing out, it's 12 degrees, it just makes it a lot more convenient going from door to door and not having to pay the crazy Uber prices that we have going on right now. But don't worry, there are a lot of cons. So for me personally, the biggest one would be alternate side parking. We've gotten lucky within the past year or two that they don't have alternate sides for every day. There's normally like Monday and Wednesday or Tuesday and Thursday, and as of recent it's really just been the last day. So for us, we really only have to worry about Thursdays and Fridays, but there has been a few times where we're circling around the neighborhood for 30 plus minutes looking for a spot. There has been some times when we just ended up saying, forget this, it's been an hour circling for a spot, I'm just putting it in a lot and then paying that for the night. But yeah, I would say overall, I can't imagine not having a car in the city. I actually grew up in a suburban part of Queens, which is why I needed a car in order to get around. There isn't really many subways where I was, you know, born and raised at, so the buses were always super crowded, and that was kind of like my only option. Now we live in Long Island City, and if you guys don't know, that's only 10 minutes outside of Midtown. There are tons of subways near us, so we don't necessarily need a car in terms of getting around. But like I said, when it comes to the convenience of taking my dogs around and even going to visit our family that still live in the same neighborhood, it just makes it a lot easier for us.
Siera's point about her dogs is also something that I've never really thought about. I only have a cat. She's very small. She though reluctantly, does fit in a carrier and I can take her on the subway. But if you have large pets, this is definitely something to consider. So all of this considered, what do I think? I think that for me personally, it is not worth it to have a car here. I live in a very centrally located part of the city. I have easy access to several different subway lines and buses. I also just don't really like to drive, especially not in traffic like we have here. I find driving really, really stressful and would almost always rather take the subway anyway. So I just don't find the expense of paying for a parking garage or the time suck and stress of dealing with street parking to be worth it. That being said, obviously there are people out there like Siera and Pedro who really value having a car, and the positives outweigh the negatives for them. And maybe you would feel like that too. Or maybe you would feel more like ActionKid and I, who find it easier to not have one personally. It's all circumstantial, and you really just have to weigh the pros and cons and see what's best for you. And I really hope that this video helped you to do that. Thank you so much to ActionKid, Siera, and Pedro for taking the time to give us their thoughts. I have linked both ActionKid and Siera's YouTube channels in the description, along with Pedro's Instagram, and I would really appreciate if you would go show them some love. They are all wonderful people and creators. Thank you so much for watching this video. Give it a like if you enjoyed it, please. It really does help me out. Comment down below and let me know if you would have a car in New York City. Subscribe if you haven't already for more New York City based content, and I will see you in the next one.